Welcome everyone, this is Gwydion, and today I'm going to be doing a flip through of Warlord Ascendant 2nd Edition, which was recently released. This is a solo skirmish game of conquest and exploration, and it's a large book, but it's also very modular, so don't be intimidated. We'll go through this and we'll try to go through it relatively quickly, highlighting some of the things that I think are really relevant and interesting. So obviously by Alex T, Black Oath Entertainment, as you know. Cover art is by Juan Gomez Cabello, and interior art by Simone Tameta. Apologies if I'm butchering any of these names. Map by Glenn Seal, and editing by Katie Lynch. Katie Lynch frequents the forum quite a bit, so great job on helping Alex with the editing. Love the artwork. You can see this is similar to the background. And table of contents, the point is there's a very large scope here, but again, we'll go through it with some alacrity here. All right, from chaos comes the crown. So Warlord Ascendant is set in the world of sacrifice, incense, and iron role-playing, and you're taking control of a small war band. This could be a group of mercenaries, soldiers, desperate peasants, and there's also, if you wait till the end, there's kind of a bonus way to play this that is pretty unique and interesting. But it is a narrative skirmish war game. So instead of large armies clashing in these huge battles, you're going to control smaller squads. And importantly, this is also built and updated to the momentum engine. And it's been modified from a D20 rule set to a D100 rule set. The momentum engine offers a lot of flexibility and narrative opportunities, and it seemed great to Alex for rolling this out to the Warlord Ascendant 2nd Edition. We'll talk more about the momentum engine, but think about it as it's going to be a pool, and when you do fail initially, and you can try to roll again, it's kind of a failure with teeth, but more to come on that. So again, what do you need to play? It's going to be, basic things. You're going to have a grid, mat, things like that, and obviously some polyhedral dice. Let you all go through this, but it's kind of what you would expect. And the content this is played on is the content of Nea, and you'll see a little bit more background as you go through this. There is a 100 Years War that's ongoing, and that's between the Kingdom of Bavaria and the Cadnor Dominion. So it's been going on for about 103 years. So there's a map of the no man's land and a little more information that you can kind of look through here. Some explanation of, why fight. There's a number of reasons, right? Valuable resources to gain strategic advantage. You might be threatened, whether it's militarily or other interests that are threatening you. And again, we'll go through the momentum engine as we talk about the actual game mechanics, but it's a single skill roll in the momentum pool, which is a resource you can spend to turn failure into success. But again, it comes at a cost, which we'll walk through. All right, I'm going to flip through some of these without commenting, just so we can move relatively quickly. So how about creating your warband? So this is basically the character creation function. So what's the structure of a warband, and kind of how does it work? Some of the elements that you're going to encounter are command actions, and you can choose 3 different command actions before a battle. We talked a bit about a momentum pool. We'll talk more about that. Each warband starts with a fixed number of members. There's stash, so all the gears you collect. There's supplies, different unit types. So the types of units that we'll walk through briefly are leaders, veterans, and recruits. Leaders, obviously, every warband that's worth its salt has to have some kind of leader. So that's going to be a commander in a mercenary band, maybe a chieftain. They might be called different things, but obviously it's going to be leader of that unit. Veterans are going to be your kind of hardcore folks, and this is going to be the core part of your warband, the capable members. And then obviously everyone needs the frontline grunts or recruits. You have starting gear, and then we're going to talk a little bit now about the different types of warbands. I'm going to flip through these. I'll start on the Acalian War Dancers. So we'll talk just a bit about these, and I'll hit some highlights on the others. But you can see some really cool art. There's a good background on each of the different types of warbands. So the Acalian war dancers come from the harsh northern highlands, and they're roaming bands of warriors who have for quite a long time taken advantage of the chaos in no man's land to conduct various types of raids. So you're going to get some random tables for the warband names, and then we'll get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts, which is the numbers. So you can see a war dancer band starts with one leader. In this case, they're called an ardran or leader. Two war dancers, which are veterans and recruits. And then you have different types of command actions, and these will be unique to the various types of war bands we'll flip through. In this case, they'll have blade dance, blood debt, frenzy, no mercy, rally, relentless, swift maneuvers, and untraceables. And then untraceable, excuse me. And then you'll have there's a little bit of flavor, color text that I don't want to read through. I'll leave it to you to experience. But let's look a little bit at the ardran, which is the leader. So you'll see the different stats, and in this case, what sets the ardran and this type of warband apart: agility. So they've got really strong agility and defense, 50 and 60 respectively. And obviously they're very strong in close combat and ranged combat. So really good at combat, 60s each. And in this case, they have what's called Warrior's Flow. And once per turn, they can make a defense check with advantage. So that's cool when defending against a melee attack. Different weapon proficiencies. The other thing that's unique about this type of warband, the Acalian War Dancers, is they do not have any armor. They cannot use armor. So very nimble and again, good ranged, but they can't use armor. And this goes through the veterans and the recruits. So let's just flash briefly through some of these. The Cadonians, or Cadonorians, excuse me, Cadonorians. And these are one of the two kingdoms that initiated the 100 Years' Wars. 100 Years' War. Jeez. And they're experts at incorporating archery tradition with, fielding large unit of expert archers to support the smaller number of armed knights. Again, you're going to have tables if you'd like to create a random name, numbers and command actions. You can see a little bit different, obviously, than what we walked through before. Brilliant strategist, eyes open, rally, watchful. And again, there's another little snippet story at the bottom that I'm going to let you discover on your own. Their leader is called a sergeant, whereas their veterans, corporals, and recruits are called Levi. So then you have commoners. So commoners are the poor, the destitute, the peasants that have lost their lands and homes and really don't have anything really to live for, unfortunately. So you can come up with the name, the town of origin. Obviously, you can pick one as well. You have your numbers, your command actions, so a little bit different. For the fallen, burst of resolve, mobs. So you can see that, again, the flavor is around the common people. The leader is a mayor, retired soldier, veteran, and then peasant for recruits. And this one I thought was pretty interesting, demonic cohort, and I like that image at the top. So these are corrupted humans that walk between the two worlds, barely holding back their basic influences and impulses, and often murdering anyone not fast enough to hide from them. So you got your names again, a few command actions: demonic speed, inhuman nature, push, relentless, and again, another obviously story below that. The leader is called a witness. Twisted soldier is a veteran, and a grunt is the recruit. Inquisitorial retinue. And this, I love, again, the images, the imagery that the artists that Alex picks, I think, are always top notch. And these are really skilled fighters in all of the world. And they do have access to like this special type of archive that will give them information about humanity's enemies. So it sounds like you'll have the ability to use that kind of library or archive to get a leg up on the enemies that you might be fighting. So again, you'll be familiar with these now. Command actions are a bit different. I love ritual sacrification. Love some of these names. Divine inspiration. Super cool stuff. All right, so the Inquisitor is the leader. Oath Sworn is a veteran, Acolyte's a recruit. Then you get into your mercenaries, and just what you would expect. Mercenaries are groups of soldiers who are going to fight for money, right? As long as they're paid, they don't really care what side they're on. So different actions again, unbreakable. Some of these might have some overlap in some of the others, like push, rally. But I like that. I'll drag you to hell with me, and I'll let you read about that one later and the story as you're familiar with now. Commander is the leader, corporal and rookie, and the Bavarians. So we mentioned this at the beginning. There are two major factions, and this is the second faction that's involved in the Hundred Years' War, the Bavarian. Very well armed and disciplined, and usually they're led by a noble with a very large detachment with them. So you can look again at the actions, the story is sergeants, the leader, soldier, and levy or Levi, a recruit. This is a pretty unique type of warband here called the Risen. There are undead that are with throughout the world, and most of them are just mindless and don't have, they're hungry and they're just driven totally by this insatiable need to eat. But the Risen are undead that have really been brought back by like a necromancer, so a single powerful creature that controls them. So you can play as a necromancer and in their band of Risen. This is a little bit more for folks that have played a few times and really can grasp the concept. So it's a little more of an expert warband, but something that I think is cool and unique. And you can see they have some unique traits and things with them. Graveborn resilience, raising the dead, repulsive, love that. So they can't hire swords for hire, I think is the point there. So the numbers, their command actions, virulent necrosis. I should have studied all these names before I embarked on this play or read through here. But necromantic aura, I love this. Really cool stuff. So obviously the necromancer is the leader, walking corpses, great stuff. All right, the character stat block. So the core stats, you're going to have gear slots, so how much you can carry. You're going to have levels, loyalty, and the higher a character's loyalty, the less prone they're going to be from running away, right? If you have to do a morale check, proficiencies. Each character except for the leader will have a recruitment cost, and that's basically what it takes to bring them on board to join your band. You're going to have speed, total experience points, upkeep. Nobody works for free in this world. So your characters are going to need to have something in the form of upkeep that you're going to have to go through as part of the playthrough. And vigor, how much the damage they can take before they're knocked out. So this creates a condition called out of action, and they're removed from the battle. And then we'll kind of walk through what does that mean. After a battle, anybody that's been out of action will have to engage in some roles. So we'll go through that. So let's get into the skills. Skills, some of these are going to be pretty familiar to you. Agility, athletics, close combat, defense, all of that's, pretty typical. Presence is, a little bit different, but it's going to be like charisma, charm, ability to influence others. So you have your ranged combat, reason. So how well can you make a guess or some type of decision? You're going to have a reason check, and resolve. So like somewhat like Constitution, but this allows a creature to withstand the psychological impact of exposure to horrors. So let's get into combat maneuvers. So there are a ton of different combat maneuvers, but every member of your warband starts with one single combat maneuver. So, and they can only, each of their known combat maneuvers can only be used once per battle. So you can see there's quite a few different types here, and I'll just kind of read a couple as I'm flipping through here. Adrenaline surge, bloodthirsty, combat awareness, end it now. So they're all pretty unique, and there's a whole, a few pages on these pathfinders, lone wolf, target weak spots. So quite a bit of variety in those. And then you also have feats, and feats are passive benefits. Okay, each feat can be taken only once by the same character as you're going through here, and they have a cost in terms of development points. So you'll have things like, all kinds: austere, backstab, close quarters, dirty fighter, dodge. So you're going to really be able to build out your character the way you want. Weapon specialization, vicious wounds, and you'll also have something called incantation. And incantation, most people in this world would really laugh. Like, there's no such thing as magic or supernatural, but there are some arcane arts that do exist. They're rare, and they're really available to learn, but those who really manage to peek behind can get them. So in order to be able to do this, a character must possess the arcane talent feat. So just know that, and then you're going to see a lot of the incantations listed here. Eldritch Shroud of the Occultist, Necrotic Tethering, some pretty cool, unique incantation if you choose to go down this route. All right, improving your character. So there is obviously a level progression in here, and I'll let you kind of go through that. Skill improvement, increased upkeep. So as your characters become more powerful and capable, they'll need more supplies, and they're going to demand a pay raise. Does that sound familiar, like real life? But that's something that you're going to have to experience. And I love this I love the black and white art in this. I think it's really, really cool and fits. All right, the core rules. So the core resolution mechanic is you're going to make a check, and the player's going to roll a single D100. You're going to determine if it's a success or a failure. Success less than or equal to the relevant skill score, and you achieve your goal. Failure, you fail to achieve your goal unless you push. So let's go through now a little bit more about the momentum pool. So every player warband has a momentum pool, and it's the combination of your grit, your luck, your will to succeed, and you can spend it in one of two ways: pre-roll or post-failure. So pre-roll is called assure. So what that does is you can spend one momentum pool before you roll to add plus 20 to your skill roll. Okay, and that's for a single check. So this is kind of a safe way to kind of increase your odds, right? So you can do that. So, but the second way is if you fail a check, you can choose to spend one MP to push the roll. When you push the roll, you immediately re-roll, and if it succeeds, you achieve your goal, you're good. But if you fail, you still fail, and additionally, you have to roll in the complication failure. So it's a failure with teeth, right? A failure with a cost. And you do regain all your spent momentum pool points at the start of each management phase. And you can see some of the complications listed below. So pose checks are kind of what you would think they'd be, right? You're rolling against a creature. I won't go through that. I'll let you read that. Advantage, disadvantage. If the creature has advantage, you roll and read it with a lesser number. And actually, yeah, and the 10s and the greater number as this would, if this would favor. So you're basically flipping the 10s and the 100. All right, let's get into combat. So we'll again, I don't want to go through too much detail to make this too long, but there's turns and rounds, there's activations, there is initiative, and you must, every side participating in a battle must roll a D100 for the initiative, orders, and unit activation. So each warband has a maximum of 3 orders in general. So movement and facing. So facing is important. Line of sight, areas of effect. You will have cover. There's types of terrain. There's targeting. And you do have different types of actions. So all creatures can make one of each of 3 different types of action during a combat round. Free action, move action, a reaction, and a standard action. Standard action, there are a number of different actions, and this looks a little daunting, like there's a lot of detail here, but I think, like most games, as you play through it, I think this will become a bit more second nature. You can charge, dash, grapple, perform just a standard attack, trip, use an item, an incantation, and then you'll have your attack check. So you can go through that, you can deal damage, and many creatures might have a protection, and it might be due to like their natural armor or hide or whatever it is. And let's see, flanking, overwatch. So there's a lot of complexity, but I think in a good way, not a overly complicated way, in my opinion. You can disengage, but there are attacks of opportunity if you're in melee and you move outside, I believe, of the character's range. You try to move away, it could create an attack of opportunity. Damage types are a bunch of different damage types to keep in mind: arcane, bludgeoning, fire, lightning, unholy, poison, slashing. So quite a few different types to think about. All right, statuses and conditions. So there are different things that you'll keep track of: bleeding conditions, blinded, broken. If you've played other Black Oak games, many of these are going to be familiar to you. Hindered, I think, might be a little bit neat. Out of action, this is one we talked about before, but when a creature loses all of their vigor, they're out of action and can't be activated anymore during the remainder of that battle. Characters must check their condition once the battle is over, and we'll go through that section a little bit later in the walkthrough. Loyalty and morale. So again, most characters possess a loyalty score, and that's just how strong they are attached to the cause. So that's something to keep in mind, and you will have to do some rolls sometimes for morale, and you could lose warband members if they fail on a morale roll. All right, NPC and enemy actions. So there is a structure, obviously, to the enemy activation and how they're going to go about acting. There's some great decision trees for melee, ranged, and mixed type of enemies. And enemy attitudes. That influences how they approach combat and the actions they might take during their activation. So there's cautious and aggressive, and any creatures marked bestial or bestial, as some people say, will ignore any objectives and they're going to go straight for the kill. Love this picture of this castle/keep. I think it's awesome. All right, let's get into playing the game. So this is there's different types of phases during the game. There's the battle phase where you're fighting and using your warband against one of your enemies. And there's also the management phase where you're dealing with the fallout or the consequences of the battle. Right, so you can start a new campaign. You can see the hex map below. There's a random table for region names if you want that. And hex geography, there can be different types of hexes. So this is a way to build up your terrain and your hex map. So the management phase, there's a really good structure on this page 92 of going through the management phase. And there could be events that happen. You're going to have to pay your warband. You're going to recover any spent momentum that you use, manage your stronghold. You might have towns under control. There's a really, detailed structure of this entire phase of this campaign. So definitely, there's a number of different types of events you could occur. So post-battle, so we talked about this earlier, but any of the characters that have been taken out of action have to roll on the recovery table to find out their fate. And if you have a result of 6 to 15, you must also make a roll on the permanent wound table. So it does matter if you're knocked out of the battle, and there could be some significant consequences. Upkeep payment, so we talked about that, but there will be an upkeep payment component, stronghold management, and there's ways you can upgrade your stronghold. So you can pay for barracks, you can pay for, bestiary. Some beasts can't be broken, others must be convinced. So it looks like you can create pens and cages to house and train creatures of war. That's interesting. Chapels, mage towers, marketplace. So quite a bit that you can use to upgrade that stronghold. Town management. So sooner or later, you might have one or more settlements under your control, unique locations. So this discusses like trading, recruiting, work, statistics, and the management town setup. Scouting and exploration during every management phase. Any character that isn't too injured can be sent out to check different hexes, so explore a little bit for you. And you can use this table for a random location name. D100, so a lot of options here for naming. And then you might have exploration events that are on this table attached. And various different locations. All right, preparing for the battle phase. So once you've kind of gone through the whole management, it should give you a really good idea of what you need to do next. And usually that's attempting to capture a new location to earn the benefits of that location. And locations are always defended by some sort of enemy force. So there's a structure to how you will go about this, preparing for the battle phase. And then once you're in the battle phase, there are two main reasons why you might go to battle, right? There's offensive or defensive. So You're going to pick your characters and their gear, pick your command actions, as we talked about previously, determine the battle's difficulty. So there are going to be there might be different talents that the enemies have that you face. And here's a D20 table with all the types of talents they could have. You're going to set up the battlefield. So you're going to grab a blank combat grid or a battle map, and you're going to place cover for the elements, place terrain elements, and determine the strategic point of the battlefield and your starting positions. So you're going to get all of this set up before you begin your battle. And each battlefield has one strategic position that's going to allow that side that controls it to issue one more order per turn. So it's basically like, think about, you get a high ground or something that's really giving you an advantage and you really want to get that position. And then you're going to place the creatures throughout the battlefield. And before the actual fighting begins, you're going to roll on the battle events table. So this is going to give you some unique things that happen, that occur during the battle. So I love all the flavor that this gives you to the battle. You can flee the battlefield if things aren't looking good for you. And it's primarily intended to be a solo game, but it is simple to modify this and play this for co-op and versus games. So you can look through that here. Again, I love this image. It looks like a huge witch troll or something, but I think it looks amazing. All right, threats. So threats are really going to be basically the enemies, the creatures that you face, and they're going to have different stats, attitude. So they could be super hostile, or they might be cautious and aggressive. I guess cautious or aggressive. Different damage types. You'll have the numbers, traits, and features. So we'll just flip through a few of these, and you can see really clean structure, stat blocks, boxes for any traits they have, different types of leaders. I'm going to stop on a few, but I'm just going to flip through a few of these for you and stop on. I thought this one looks really interesting. So this is the corpse grinder, a hulking beetle-like scavenger the size of a cow. That sounds very disturbing. Powerful mandibles designed to crush bone and armor to get at the rich marrow within. Love that. So they have the stats: agility, defense, resolve, speed, athletics, endurance, number that you're going to face, the size, and close combat, presence. So everything you're going to need to run them is in that simple stat block, which I think is awesome. So some of these are going to be really unique. Fen crones, I haven't heard of that. These are covens of withered witches who dwell in fetid swamps and marshes. Giant centipedes, so that's something that you're probably familiar with from other games. Giant lizards, you got to have giant spiders. I mean, come on. Always have to have spiders. The grave turtle, though, that's different. Semi-aquatic ambush predator found in bog swamps and sluggish rivers. Love that. Hell swine, that sounds cool. Ikanu, Krathic automaton. Leper knights, the possessed. So some very cool different types of creatures that you're going to face. And then you're also going to have potentially swords for hire. So you have your warband, but after you've built an inn for your stronghold, you'll be able to start hiring the services of swords for hire. So you're going to have to pay for these, but there's all kinds of unique types of swords for hire that you can recruit and you can purchase. Really interesting, and they all have a bit of a backstory behind them. So I'm just going to kind of flip through these. I won't talk to them in specifics, but you can see some really good imagery for each and a fairly detailed, I should say, very nice description of each of these types. All right, gears and spoil of war. So all of your characters are going to have a limited number of slots, and you can see the different slots. Gear availability is going to vary from 1 to 6, how easy or difficult it is to find. You can have different weapon properties that will give different modifiers to different rolls and checks. And your weapons here, so we'll flip through some of the types of weapons that you could find during Warlord Ascendant 2nd Edition. And very nice, simple structure here to the layout. I love it. You can have the cost, damage, very easy to see, availability, traits of the weapons. And again, you're going to have some that'll look familiar, but some that might be a little different, like a crook. I haven't heard that in many other games. Flail, obviously. you're probably familiar with. Glaives and great clubs, absolutely. Hand axes. So there's some things that are going to be very familiar to you, but there are going to be some that I think are a little unique. Pitchfork. I love that. I don't see that in too many games. All right. And you even have an unarmed trait or property here that you can get through whips. I do love whips for these games. I think that's always a fun, unique weapon to try out. Ranged weapons. So you have different types of bows, composite, hand, heavy crossbow, longbow, shortbow, and slings, and different types of armors. And some of these armors are going to have penalties depending on how heavy they are. Headwear, shields, and then you get into some of the tables that will tell you a little bit more about, like in this case, this is just common purchasable gear. So things like bandages, caltrops, nets, thieves' tools, which will grant you advantage on agility checks when attempting to open locked doors. Common lootable gear. Potions, you always got to have potions in your role-playing games, right? I like that. Clotting potion, that's a little different. And that, the imbiber becomes permanently immune to the bleeding condition. Very cool. Potion of dulled heart. I'm just reading through a few of these. For the duration of a single battle, the imbiber becomes immune to charmed or frightened. Super cool. Spoils of war. So these are tables that you're going to roll on, I suspect, after a battle, perhaps. Random weapons, artifacts, armor, gear. Always have a number of rollable random tables in Alex's games. So artifacts. So as I mentioned, the magic is not pervasive in the world, and but there are some items that are really unique and exceptionally well crafted weapons and armor. So you're going to find things like artifacts, and you'll see different types of artifacts. There's tables in here that you can roll on, and then you can also build a crafting station in your stronghold. And that grants you access to very unique war gear via something called orders. And this gear is unique, and it's known as masterwork gear because it comes with really unique traits, giving your character an edge. So you'll see some of these, we'll just flip through these. There's a significant cost. Each piece of masterwork gear costs 50 supplies to craft. But there's different types of, specialized weapons. Club the Peacemaker, composite bow, Storm's Whisper. I love all the names for these. Very cool. Battering ram. So all kinds you can see as I'm flipping through here. Quite a few different types of artifacts. Protective gear, so a whole host of armor as well. Bulwark of the Faith, super cool. Acolyte's Cowl, so a hood, heavy helmet, the Iron Saint. Large seal, phalanx, wall, and trinkets. So different like amulets, beads, bracelets, brooches, and charms. So a whole host of things that you can find in this world. All right, and this should be the last thing that we're going to go through. And this is an appendix. And this gives you, I mentioned this, I teased this in the front end, but this is a special mode that you can play called the Lone Wolf mode. And this allows you to play exactly one of the individuals in the game. You're going to be one of the branded, an exceptional individual that have managed to survive being marked for sacrifice in a demonic ritual. So in this case, instead of playing an entire warband, you're going to be truly being a solo player. And it's because of that, it uses a completely different set of rules for character advancement and warband management. So what this really does is give you a completely different way to play this game. So I think that's awesome. You have the warband, which is how this created. But those of you that really want the true solo and just one character, you can do that too. So this goes through character creation and your core stats, skills, combat maneuvers, and even it does have some warband features because even though you're not technically a warband, you have many elements in common with a warband. You're going to have command actions. You're going to have a momentum pool. You have a momentum pool of 3. You're going to have morale and different numbers, improving your character, obviously, and this will be completely unique. It's almost like a hidden surprise gem as you make your way through the entire rulebook. There are going to be some changes to the management phase. So a lone wolf character can participate in 3 different management phase actions. So the whole structure here is going to be different than what you've seen and what we walked through. And you're going to have, because you don't really have a stronghold, although you can, but because you wouldn't typically have a stronghold or govern over town, you're going to be managing contacts and reputation. So I kind of imagine like, it's similar to being a thief, right? You have your contacts, you have your reputation in your guilds. So you still have a structure and an organization you can tap into, but you're a solo player. And your reputation score dictates the quality of services in your network. So that will improve, I think, over time, or it might go down. And you're going to have contacts and services. So a way that you can get access to different types of things that will help you. And there is a call out at the bottom here. You can play with a stronghold. There's nothing to say that you can't. And instead of conquering hexes, you're going to establish points of interest within a hex. So again, a very, very well fleshed out ability to play as truly just a solo role player in this game. So that is it. I'm going to scroll back up to the top now for a second, but I really think you would, I would give it a try if this seemed interest to you. And you can find this. We'll make sure to drop links to you on where to find this. So Warlord Ascendant 2nd edition. Give us a comment if there's anything more we didn't cover that you'd like to hear about. Drop a comment and a like, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching all.